Ma'am, we're going to need you to give up that seat for a passenger who actually belongs in VIP. The words landed across the first-class cabin like a crack through glass. Conversations faded. Heads turned. Even the quiet hum of the aircraft seemed to shrink beneath the weight of what had just been said. Monica Reynolds slowly lifted her eyes from the tablet resting on her lap and looked at the flight attendant standing over her. Nicole Harper wore a practiced smile, the kind designed to appear polite while delivering something anything but polite. Seat 2A sat beside the window, one of the most desirable seats on the aircraft, and Monica had boarded nearly 30 minutes earlier without issue. Her ticket was valid. Her boarding pass had scanned green. Her name was in the system. Yet somehow none of that seemed to matter anymore. Nicole folded her hands neatly in front of her uniform and nodded toward the aisle. "There appears to be a seating adjustment," she said. "We'd appreciate your cooperation." Monica glanced past her. Standing several feet away was a tall white man in an expensive navy blazer. Richard Whitmore, platinum traveler, frequent flyer, the type of passenger airline employees often treated like royalty. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who rarely heard the word no. "My boarding pass says 2A," Monica replied calmly. Nicole's smile tightened. "Mr. Whitmore has certain travel accommodations." The air in the cabin changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just charged, like everyone suddenly understood what was happening but hoped they were wrong. Richard stepped forward and looked directly at Monica. "I'm sure there's another seat available," he said casually. "This doesn't have to be difficult." Monica studied him for a moment. Then she looked back out the window where the evening sun painted the runway in gold. She had heard versions of this conversation before. Different city, different faces, same assumption. A woman dressed in simple dark jeans and a black sweater couldn't possibly belong in a premium seat. Nicole leaned closer. "We'd like to resolve this before departure." Monica remained perfectly still. No anger, no raised voice, no argument. The stillness unsettled Nicole more than resistance ever could. Several rows back, a young flight attendant named Ava Martinez paused while helping another passenger. Something about the interaction felt wrong. She watched carefully, but said nothing. Around the cabin, eyes drifted toward Monica. Some curious, some uncomfortable, some already looking away. Nicole straightened and made a decision. Reaching toward the intercom handset mounted near the galley entrance, she pressed the button. Her voice echoed through the premium cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently resolving a seating discrepancy involving a passenger assignment issue. Thank you for your patience." Every head turned now. Monica felt dozens of eyes settle on her. Public, visible, deliberate. Richard folded his arms. Nicole stood waiting. And for the first time since boarding, Monica Reynolds understood exactly why she had chosen to take this flight herself instead of reading another report from behind a boardroom table. The complaints had been real. The stories had been real. And now, at 35,000 feet before the aircraft had even left the gate, she was living one herself. Monica Reynolds did not reach for her phone. She did not demand a supervisor. She did not remind anyone that the airline's logo painted across the side of the aircraft ultimately answered to her. Instead, she sat quietly as the cabin absorbed the awkward silence left behind by Nicole's announcement. That silence told her more than any quarterly report ever could. For the past 8 months, complaints had been arriving from every corner of the company. Passengers described being judged by their clothes, questioned about their seats, redirected from premium cabins, and treated differently based on assumptions no policy manual had ever authorized. Executives reviewed spreadsheets. Lawyers reviewed statements. Public relations teams reviewed social media posts. But Monica wanted something none of them could provide. She wanted the truth without warning. That was why she boarded Flight 728 alone. No corporate security. No executive assistant. No recognition. Just a valid ticket and a chance to see the airline through the eyes of an ordinary traveler. The woman sitting across the aisle watched Nicole carefully and then glanced toward Monica. Her expression suggested sympathy, but she quickly looked away. Years of witnessing uncomfortable situations had taught people to stay silent. Nicole seemed encouraged by the lack of resistance. She adjusted her uniform jacket and spoke in a softer voice. "I am sure we can find another solution for you." The wording sounded polite. The meaning did not. Richard remained standing nearby, one hand resting on an overhead compartment. He appeared remarkably comfortable waiting for someone else's seat to become available. Monica noticed that. Confidence like that rarely appeared without experience. This was not the first time he had expected accommodation. Near the front galley, Ava Martinez continued observing. She had worked for Skybridge Airlines for less than a year. During training, instructors spoke endlessly about customer dignity, fairness, and respect. Watching this interaction unfold felt like watching those promises disappear one sentence at a time. Ava glanced toward the digital manifest displayed on a crew tablet. A name caught her attention. Monica Reynolds. Something about it felt familiar. She could not place it immediately, but the recognition lingered. Nicole noticed Ava looking and quickly angled the screen away. "Focus on your section," she said. Ava nodded, though her concern remained. Outside the aircraft windows, baggage vehicles moved beneath the fading evening sky. Boarding was nearly complete, yet departure remained delayed by a problem that should never have existed. Monica folded her hands calmly. She had spent 20 years building one of the fastest-growing airlines in the country. She remembered sleeping in airport terminals during the early days, meeting investors between flights, and listening to people explain why her vision would never work. She remembered being underestimated then too. The difference was that back then she had no power to change the system. Now she did. Nicole checked her watch. Richard sighed dramatically. Several passengers exchanged uneasy looks. The atmosphere inside first. Class no longer felt luxurious. It felt like a test. And without realizing it, everyone on board had already become part of it. Monica looked out the window one more time as the last traces of sunlight reflected across the wing. Then she turned back toward Nicole, her expression calm, composed, and unreadable. The inspection she had planned for months had finally begun, and the people creating the problem still had no idea who was sitting in seat 2A. The delay stretched into another minute, then another. What should have been a routine departure was slowly becoming something else. Nicole Harper no longer sounded concerned about seating logistics. She sounded determined to win. Standing beside seat 2A, she crossed her arms and glanced toward Richard Whitmore, as if reassuring him that everything was under control. Richard responded with a faint smile that carried more entitlement than gratitude. He looked around the cabin, fully expecting the situation to resolve in his favor. Monica Reynolds noticed how naturally the assumption came to him. Nobody had asked whether he deserved the seat. Nobody had questioned his presence. Nobody had suggested another solution. The burden of proving she belonged rested entirely on her shoulders. Nicole lowered her voice. "Ma'am, we are trying to avoid unnecessary complications before departure." Monica met her gaze. "My boarding pass was accepted. My seat assignment is correct." Nicole nodded as though listening, but her expression said otherwise. Sometimes adjustments are necessary. Across the aisle, several passengers exchanged looks. One businessman quietly removed his headphones. A woman near the front row stopped reading her magazine. The entire cabin seemed trapped between curiosity and discomfort. Nobody wanted involvement, but nobody could ignore what was happening either. Richard finally stepped forward. "Look, I fly more than 200,000 miles a year," he said. "The airline usually takes care of premium customers." Monica studied him carefully. "And you believe that means taking someone else's seat?" Richard shrugged. "I believe there is a reason these situations happen." The words lingered in the air. Not openly hostile, not openly offensive, yet somehow worse because everyone understood the implication without hearing it directly. Near the galley, Ava Martinez felt her stomach tighten. She looked again at the crew tablet. The name still bothered her. Monica Reynolds. She knew she had seen it somewhere before. During training perhaps. During a company presentation. Somewhere important. Before she could think further, Nicole appeared beside her. "I need you focused on service," Nicole said sharply. "Not passenger records." Ava nodded, but doubt continued growing inside her. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Back in first class, Nicole tried another approach. "If you voluntarily relocate, we can provide a travel credit." Monica almost smiled. 20 years of building an airline. Thousands of employees. Billions in annual revenue. And now someone was offering her a travel credit to surrender a seat she had legitimately purchased. The irony was almost unbelievable. Yet she remained calm. That calmness began affecting the room. Passengers expected arguments. They expected frustration. Instead, they watched a woman sit with quiet dignity while others repeatedly questioned her right to be there. The contrast was becoming impossible to ignore. Richard checked his watch dramatically. Nicole sighed. Outside, the last baggage container disappeared into the cargo hold. The aircraft should have been taxiing by now. Instead, the cabin remained frozen around a conflict that revealed more with every passing minute. Then Richard spoke again. Some people should learn when they are not welcome. Silence followed. Heavy. Immediate. Ava looked up. Several passengers stared directly at him. Monica did not react. She simply held his gaze for a moment before looking away. The stillness unsettled him. It unsettled Nicole too. Because for the first time since this began, they were no longer controlling the atmosphere inside the cabin. The passengers were starting to notice who was behaving with dignity and who was not. Ava Martinez could no longer focus on beverage inventories or boarding procedures. The uneasy feeling had become impossible to ignore. She stepped quietly into the forward galley and pulled up the internal passenger manifest again. Her eyes moved down the screen until they stopped on seat 2A. Monica Reynolds. This time the name triggered a memory. 3 months earlier, during a company-wide leadership presentation, a large image had appeared on a screen in the training center. Ava remembered hundreds of employees watching as the company's executive leadership discussed the future of Skybridge Airlines. She remembered a woman standing confidently beside the company logo. The image flashed through her mind now with startling clarity. The same eyes, the same calm expression. Ava stared at the screen. Her heartbeat quickened. Before she could study it longer, Nicole entered the galley. "Why are you standing here?" she asked. Ava quickly lowered the tablet. "I was checking the manifest." Nicole frowned. "You were spending an unusual amount of time worrying about one passenger." Ava hesitated. "I think there may be a misunderstanding." Nicole's expression hardened immediately. "There is no misunderstanding. There is a seating issue, and we are handling it." Then she walked away without waiting for a response. Ava watched her leave. Something inside her shifted. Until now she had assumed there might be information she was missing. Now she was beginning to suspect the opposite. Back in first class, the atmosphere remained tense. Passengers had stopped pretending not to notice. A man near row 3 quietly opened his phone. A woman across the aisle whispered something to her husband. Every glance seemed directed toward seat 2A. Monica Reynolds remained composed. She sat as though the tension belonged to everyone else. Richard Whitmore appeared increasingly irritated by her refusal to move. "This is becoming ridiculous," he muttered loud enough for several nearby passengers to hear. "One person is delaying an entire flight." Monica looked at him calmly. "I did not create this situation." Richard looked away first. That small detail did not go unnoticed. Across the cabin, a passenger named Emily Foster had been observing everything since boarding. She was a business consultant from Denver who spent half her life on airplanes. She leaned toward the woman seated beside her. "Her ticket was accepted," Emily whispered. "I watched her board." The other passenger nodded slowly. "Then why are they treating her like this?" Neither had an answer. Ava returned to the cabin carrying a service tray she did not actually need. She paused near seat 2A and looked at Monica carefully. The resemblance was undeniable now. Yet if she spoke too soon and was wrong, she could create an entirely different problem. Nicole noticed Ava lingering and immediately called her back toward the galley. As Ava turned away, Monica briefly met her eyes. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. Something passed between them. Recognition. Concern. The beginning of understanding. And for the first time since the conflict started, Monica realized someone on the aircraft was finally questioning the story they had all been asked to believe. The moment Ava looked away from seat 2A, Nicole made her next move. She walked directly to the front of the cabin and picked up the intercom handset once more. Her voice filled the premium section with manufactured professionalism. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your continued patience. We are working through a passenger accommodation matter and expect a resolution shortly." The words sounded harmless. The effect was not. Every passenger knew exactly who she was talking about. Monica Reynolds sat quietly while the spotlight grew brighter around her. Nicole returned to the aisle and stood beside Richard Whitmore. The partnership between them no longer felt subtle. Richard glanced toward Monica and shook his head. "I have never seen someone hold up an entire flight over a seat." Several passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Monica remained calm. She had spent decades in boardrooms negotiating billion-dollar agreements. She had learned long ago that the loudest person in a room was rarely the strongest. Nicole leaned closer. If you continue refusing our request, we may need additional assistance from the flight deck. Monica folded her hands. I am sitting in the seat assigned to me. Nicole's expression tightened. You are making this far more difficult than necessary. Those words triggered an old memory. Suddenly, Monica was 23 years old again, standing inside a crowded airport terminal in Atlanta after a delayed connection. She remembered approaching a premium lounge entrance with a valid membership card. The employee at the desk had looked at her, then at the card, then back at her. He had asked if the card belonged to someone else. Other travelers had walked through without question. She had stood there explaining herself while strangers stared. The humiliation had stayed with her long after the flight ended. Different airport, different decade, same feeling. The memory faded as quickly as it arrived. Monica returned her attention to the present. The cabin around her seemed smaller now. The tension hung in the air like storm clouds waiting to break. Ava watched everything from several rows away. Her uncertainty was gone. She was almost certain she knew exactly who Monica was. What she did not understand was why Nicole seemed determined to push the situation even further. Then Richard crossed a line he could not take back. People like her always create these problems, he said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Silence followed immediately. A woman near row 3 lowered her phone. A businessman removed his glasses and stared directly at Richard. Even Nicole appeared surprised by the comment, though she made no effort to challenge it. Monica slowly turned her head and looked at him. Her face remained composed. No anger, no argument, just a steady gaze that forced him to sit with his own words. Richard looked away first. Again, Ava felt her pulse quicken. Around the cabin, passengers were no longer wondering who was right. They were beginning to recognize what was happening. Nicole sensed the shift and glanced nervously toward the cockpit door. For the first time since the conflict began, she seemed uncertain. Monica noticed it immediately, because when people start losing control of a situation, they often make their biggest mistake next. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that moment was getting very close. Nicole Harper finally stepped away from seat 2A and disappeared through the cockpit door. The cabin remained unusually quiet. Passengers pretended to check emails, adjust seat belts, or stare out the windows, but their attention never fully left the unfolding situation. Monica Reynolds watched the closed cockpit door without expression. She knew exactly what was happening. Someone was seeking reinforcement. Someone higher in the chain of command. A few moments later, the door opened again. Captain Daniel Brooks emerged and walked into first class with measured confidence. The sight of the captain immediately changed the atmosphere. To many passengers, a captain represented authority, final authority. Nicole followed closely behind him, her posture noticeably more relaxed now that support had arrived. Daniel stopped beside Monica's seat. Good evening, ma'am, he said. I understand there is a disagreement regarding seating assignments. Monica looked up calmly. There is no disagreement regarding my assignment. There is disagreement regarding whether I should keep it. Several passengers glanced at one another. Daniel paused. It was not the answer he expected. Nicole quickly stepped in. We have been trying to accommodate a valued customer. Daniel nodded slightly. And we would appreciate your cooperation. Monica studied both of them. Years of leadership had taught her how organizations revealed themselves under pressure. Policies mattered. Training mattered. But character mattered most when no one believed they were being watched. The captain waited for a response. Instead, Monica reached into her bag and removed her phone. She typed a short message. 7 words. Begin protocol Sky 1. Then she pressed send. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms sounded. No announcements followed. The message disappeared into the digital world like a pebble dropped into a lake. Yet somewhere beyond the aircraft, events had already begun moving. In a corporate operations center hundreds of miles away, an executive assistant named Rachel Turner received the alert. She stared at the screen for less than a second before standing up. Internal compliance officers were notified. Executive operations teams were notified. Legal advisors were notified. A process designed years earlier for serious incidents quietly came to life. Back on the aircraft, nobody knew any of that. Daniel folded his arms. Ma'am, I need to know whether you intend to comply with our request. Monica locked her phone and placed it back in her bag. I intend to remain in my assigned seat. The captain's jaw tightened slightly. Nicole looked relieved. She believed the answer strengthened her position. It did not. Across the aisle, Emily Foster watched carefully. Ava Martinez watched even more carefully. Ava noticed something unusual. Monica was not acting like a passenger who felt trapped. She was acting like someone waiting for a clock to reach a specific time. The difference was subtle but impossible to ignore. Daniel glanced toward Nicole before speaking again. Very well. We will address this matter appropriately. Then he turned and walked back toward the cockpit. Nicole followed him, confident she still controlled the situation. Monica simply looked out the window at the airport lights glowing against the evening sky. The countdown had started. The people who believed they were making decisions had no idea they had already become the subject of one. 5 minutes passed. Then 6. The aircraft remained at the gate while uncertainty slowly spread through the cabin. Nicole Harper checked her watch repeatedly. Richard Whitmore looked increasingly frustrated. Captain Daniel Brooks had returned to the cockpit, convinced the situation would soon resolve itself. But then a chime echoed from the flight deck. A moment later, another followed. Inside the cockpit, Daniel glanced at the communications display. An incoming priority call was waiting. That alone was unusual. The source made it extraordinary. Executive Operations. Daniel frowned and accepted the connection. The voice on the line was calm, direct, and unmistakably serious. Captain Brooks, this is Rachel Turner from Executive Operations. We need an immediate status update regarding passenger Monica Reynolds. Daniel felt a small knot form in his stomach. There is a seating dispute involving another premium traveler, he replied. Silence followed. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. Then Rachel spoke again. Captain, who authorized the removal request? Daniel looked through the cockpit doorway toward first class. The cabin crew believed accommodations were necessary. Another pause. Longer this time. Captain Brooks, Rachel said carefully. I strongly recommend that no further action be taken regarding passenger Monica Reynolds. The words landed harder than he expected. Why, he asked. Rachel's answer came immediately. Because executive compliance, corporate legal, and the board liaison office are now actively monitoring the incident. Daniel's pulse quickened. Corporate legal did not become involved in ordinary seating disputes. Neither did the board liaison office. Something about this situation was suddenly far larger than anyone on the aircraft understood. Outside the cockpit, Ava Martinez noticed the captain had not emerged. Nicole noticed too. Her confidence began to fade around the edges. Richard crossed his arms. What is taking so long? He asked. No one answered. Then the cockpit door opened. Daniel stepped into the cabin, but he no longer carried the certainty he had worn earlier. His expression had changed. Passengers noticed immediately. Nicole approached him. Captain, are we ready to proceed? Daniel looked at her, but did not answer right away. For the first time that evening, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Monica Reynolds watched quietly from seat 2A. The countdown she started with a 7-word message was nearing its conclusion. Ava suddenly remembered exactly where she had seen Monica before. Not in training. Not in a presentation slide. On the wall inside headquarters. A framed executive portrait displayed near the entrance of the corporate leadership center. Ava's eyes widened. The realization hit with stunning force. She looked from Monica to the captain and back again. Everything suddenly made sense. Nicole was still speaking when Daniel raised a hand to stop her. The gesture was subtle, but it silenced her instantly. The cabin grew quiet. Every passenger seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. Monica slowly stood from seat 2A. No anger. No triumph. Just calm certainty. The kind that comes from knowing the truth does not need to shout. She looked first at Nicole, then at Richard, then at Captain Brooks. You asked me to surrender a seat on an airline I own, she said. The words cut through the cabin with absolute clarity. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the hum of the ventilation system seemed distant. Richard's face lost color. Nicole stared as though the floor had disappeared beneath her. Ava closed her eyes briefly because the truth she had been piecing together was now standing openly in front of everyone. Monica's voice remained steady. My name is Monica Reynolds. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Skybridge Airlines. Silence filled the aircraft. Complete. Unavoidable. And in that silence, everything changed. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The revelation settled over the cabin like a sudden change in air pressure. Nicole Harper stood frozen beside the aisle. Richard Whitmore stared at Monica as though reality itself had shifted beneath him. Captain Daniel Brooks remained motionless near the cockpit door, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and regret. Monica did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The truth had already done the work for her. Then a notification sounded from Nicole's company tablet. The sharp tone seemed unusually loud in the silence. She looked down automatically. Her face drained of color. Another notification followed. Then another. Across the aisle, passengers watched as confidence disappeared from her posture one piece at a time. Captain Brooks checked his own device. His jaw tightened. Executive compliance. Corporate legal. Operations review. Every message carried the same designation. Priority. Immediate. Active investigation. The situation they had dismissed as a passenger dispute had become something far more serious. Monica remained standing beside seat 2A. For months, she said calmly, this company received reports from travelers who felt judged before they were ever treated as customers. Reports of assumptions. Reports of unequal treatment. Reports of people being told they did not belong. Nobody interrupted her. Today I wanted to see whether those reports reflected isolated incidents or a deeper problem. Her eyes moved, briefly toward Nicole. Now I have my answer. Ava Martinez felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because her instincts had been right. Sadness because the company she believed in had just revealed a flaw in front of an entire aircraft full of witnesses. Another alert appeared on Nicole's tablet. This time her hands trembled slightly as she read it. Richard shifted uncomfortably in the aisle. The confidence that had carried him through the evening was gone. Several passengers exchanged glances. Others openly watched. No one was pretending anymore. The entire cabin had become a witness. Captain Brooks finally spoke. Ms. Reynolds, I was not aware. Monica gently interrupted him. That was never the issue. The captain fell silent. Monica's voice remained steady. The issue was how people were treated when you believed they were ordinary. The words landed harder than any accusation. Across the cabin, Emily Foster nodded quietly. Other passengers did the same. They had seen everything unfold from the beginning. They knew exactly what she meant. Another notification appeared. Then another. Access reviews had begun. Internal investigations had begun. Decisions were already moving through corporate systems far beyond the aircraft. Nicole looked at her screen as though searching for an explanation that was not there. Monica observed her calmly. You were never tested on how you would treat a chief executive officer, she said. You were tested on how you would treat a passenger. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, because everyone understood the difference. Outside the windows, airport lights stretched across the evening darkness. Inside the cabin, the balance of power had completely reversed. The people who believed they were deciding who belonged had discovered they were the ones being evaluated all along. And the evaluation was now complete. The cabin remained quiet long after Monica Reynolds finished speaking. Nobody seemed eager to break the moment. The usual sounds of travel had faded into the background. What remained was reflection. Captain Daniel Brooks lowered his device and took a slow breath. The messages on his screen were no longer recommendations. They were directives. Formal reviews had been opened. Executive investigators were already collecting records, communications, and witness statements. The process had begun. Nicole Harper stared at her tablet in disbelief. The confidence she carried throughout the evening was gone. In its place was the realization that every decision, every comment, and every assumption had created consequences far larger than she imagined. Richard Whitmore sat down without another word. The entitlement that had filled the cabin earlier had disappeared completely. Around them, passengers watched quietly. Some looked thoughtful. Others looked disappointed. A few nodded toward Monica with visible respect. Ava Martinez felt something different. Hope. She joined the airline because she believed companies could live up to the values printed in their training manuals. Tonight had exposed a problem, but it had also exposed something else. Accountability. Monica looked around the cabin one final time. This flight will continue, she said calmly. And so will this company. But some things must change. No one argued. No one objected. They had all seen too much. Captain Brooks stepped forward. Ms. Reynolds, he said, on behalf of this crew, I apologize. Monica studied him for a moment. The purpose of leadership is not perfection, she replied. The purpose of leadership is learning when you have failed and making sure it does not happen again. The captain nodded. This time there was no defense, no explanation, just acceptance. Outside the aircraft, the final clearance for departure arrived. Ground vehicles moved away from the gate. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere felt completely different from the one that existed less than an hour earlier. The tension had dissolved, replaced by an uncomfortable but necessary honesty. Monica returned to seat 2A and fastened her seatbelt. The position she had occupied from the beginning. The position she never should have been asked to surrender. As the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, she looked out the window at the lights stretching across the runway. They blurred briefly against the glass before sharpening. Again, much like the lesson everyone on board had just learned. People reveal themselves when they believe a person has no power. That is when character becomes visible. That is when assumptions become actions. And that is when the truth emerges. The aircraft began its slow movement toward the runway while the cabin settled into silence. Some passengers returned to their books. Others stared out the windows. Ava quietly resumed her duties. Life on the flight was returning to normal, yet nobody would forget what happened. Because the issue had never been a seat. It had never been a boarding pass. It had never been a travel accommodation. The issue was a simple question hidden beneath every decision that night. Who deserves respect before their title is known? Monica closed her eyes briefly as the engines increased power. Then she opened them and looked forward. I did not raise my voice, she said softly, almost to herself. I raised the standard. And as the aircraft accelerated into the night sky, nobody who heard those words would ever forget them.